Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to the conference of the Global Apparel Sourcing Expo, the digital sourcing fair that is being organized by the IEF, the International Apparel Federation. My name is Matthijs Crietee and I'm Secretary General of the IEF, a global federation that is uniting industry associations for the apparel industry from all across the world, from all continents, uniting them to further the advancement of the apparel supply chains to create stronger, smarter, and more sustainable supply chains. Now, in this conference, we are focusing on a number of topics that are important to the apparel industry, such as sustainability, digitization, innovation, and the changing sourcing map, also as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. We are now focusing on sustainability. And I'm very happy and proud to be able to introduce to you Liesl Truscott, European Material Strategy Director of Textile Exchange. And she will explain to us Textile Exchange's view on what the future holds for material sourcing in a post-COVID world. So talking about sustainability in apparel, we need, first of all, to talk about materials. After all, this determines for a large part
the topic of my
the environmental impact of clothing is for a large part determined by the materials the clothing is made of. So without further ado, I would like to give the word to Liesl Truscott to enlighten us on this topic. Thank you.
Thanks, Matthijs. Well, COVID-19 put the whole world on pause due to the urgent need to deal with a sudden life-threatening situation. But it changed our minds equally profoundly. It'll be difficult for many of us to go back to the way we lived before, and our perceived sense of security of our existence, at least for many of us in the West. Our sense of self and of humans' ability to adjust to be successful on this planet has well and truly been shaken by this pandemic. That's in part due to the complexity of this virus and its own success as a species, but also in part due to the recognition that COVID-19 is just the beginning. We're now seeing that play out, this interconnectedness of COVID with climate change and the loss of nature, and inevitably with social disruption. This connection has now been made and causing even greater concern for our future. Now, these threats are not new. They've been bubbling away under the surface for a while now, but the more palpable experience of living with a global pandemic, combined with having more time on our hands due to social distancing and lockdown regimes, has resulted in many more conversations and really caused people to think more deeply about the things that they've taken for granted. And I think this has led us to a new level of awareness. And COVID-19 has shown us how dependent our own well-being is on the health and well-functioning of our planet, where viruses are kept where they belong and don't become dangerous for other species. And of course, more recently, this need for us to address inequality. And if you think about it, this call to action, if you will, from Mother Nature, from ethnic communities, Indigenous communities, and from young people, makes it a pretty compelling time to step up in every possible way. COVID-19 has taken the things that we care about most to something that we want to act on. And for many of us, it means it's even helped validate this urgency to step up on climate action, on biodiversity, and on social justice, among many other interconnected issues. You could say Mother Nature has sent us to our rooms to take a necessary pause, to think about the way we live our lives, and to rethink about what really matters before it's too late. As one writer put it, that is just a dress rehearsal for something that could be much scarier. So I'm Liesl Truscott. As Matthijs said, I'm the European and Material Strategy Director at Textile Exchange. We're a non-profit. We're working to accelerate sustainability in the textile industry with a special focus on fibre materials at the base of the supply chain. And from this angle on sustainability, we encourage companies to take what we call a portfolio approach to their materials sourcing. That means to look across their entire materials use, from cotton to synthetics to man-made cellulosics to animal fibers, and work towards transitioning to the most sustainable options. We call this a preferred materials portfolio approach. A portfolio approach is a journey, and every journey needs a North Star. And for us, it's the vision of a world of regenerative and circular materials. Over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to talk to you about what this material journey might look like in a post-COVID world. We'll explore the impacts of this global pandemic on fibre sourcing strategies, and we'll take a look at how transparency has been a powerful measure of industry self-regulation in a COVID-19 world. So what impacts will COVID-19 play on fibre markets and sourcing strategies? If you look at the business impacts of COVID-19 on the textile sector, we probably see the crisis at its worst. To put it very simply, fashion works to a fast turnaround in a marketplace. For most businesses, success is measured by speed to market and the rapid turnover of products. For this model to work, it requires high volumes of low-cost inputs and high volumes of low-cost outputs. What's more, it's driven by high competitive margins. If your target is a $2 t-shirt, everything has to fit under that price point. In addition, anonymity in the supply chain has generally been considered a competitive advantage because this allows for ease of movement by companies between suppliers. But this way of transacting in the marketplace has eroded trust and can compromise integrity, and this can be felt both up and down the supply chain. Now, with COVID-19, this has been more deeply exposed, the fragility and the flaws in the way of working and of thinking, and has pretty much turned the situation on its head. Now, with COVID-19, so what does the future hold for us? For starters, success for our industry going forward will depend on building back supply security and investing in partnerships within supply networks. It'll mean knowing where products come from and where they go to, and means a deeper sharing of risk and reward. In other words, value sharing through the supply network. It'll also need the help of all of us as consumers to help drive the change by rewarding responsible companies with our consumer dollars, because at the end of the day, companies have to profit to be healthy. It also means slowing down cycles of production and consumption, and moving towards service-based and circular business models rather than the linear ones that create so much waste, as well as drive down the business resilience that is needed to underpin success in the new world. We talk about it all the time, but building trust and commitments and translating this to business success is a very different approach and aspiration to the ones we've held before. But it holds a really exciting potential to build this bridge from the past to the future, to test the boundaries on what's possible if we redefine things like competition and success. But of course, we're not going to get there overnight. It'll take some time and it'll take some practice. Right now, it's fair to say the industry is in a state of suspended uncertainty. We don't really know how companies will survive financially, and we don't know how companies will keep to their ambitious sustainability commitments and targets. What we can see is that companies that have stepped up on sustainability really want to stay true to this, and research has shown that companies with high sustainability credentials are doing better in terms of business stability. But despite the many positive references, research that we've carried out at Textile Exchange shows that companies are still in these early stages of understanding how to have these conversations within their supply base. particularly with their raw material suppliers. Our recent poll shows that around 80% of companies have not really engaged with their suppliers on how to go forward in a post-COVID world. And you can see here how companies want to stay committed to the targets that they've set and will continue to use or increase the use of preferred materials, indicated by the number over the 5 mark, but they're not prepared to take too many risks or explore new markets in preferred materials at this stage. The additional unknown is how companies will maintain their commitment to use of recycled synthetic materials when the price of oil has gone down so dramatically, and that's affected the cost of virgin fibers, of course, against the cost of using recycled inputs. Another important variable, as I mentioned, is consumer behavior post-COVID-19. We're hearing stronger opinions that consumer awareness is growing and customers are seeking out more sustainable products in the market. But as we head back into a more normal shopping experience, time will tell us if this is really going to be the case. And now let's take a look at this piece about transparency and how it appears to be driving a kind of industry self-regulation. With the rise of social media and the speed of communication now, we're living in a hyper-transparent world. Every action and reaction that is taken is being watched by anybody and by everybody. The synergies between speed of the spread of the global pandemic and the speed of social media is truly quite astounding. Well, at least it is to me. In real time, we can check COVID-19 cases and the logistical flows or lack of flows of apparel and other merchandise between being exported and imported around the globe. Here in the UK, we've had to put one city back into lockdown, the city of Leicester. Why? Because Leicester has a concentration of low-cost clothing factories and the owners didn't take COVID precautions, not closing down during the first lockdown and not practicing social distancing since. And what has been the result? The internet fashion retailer Boohoo, which was responsible for 80% of the orders being sewn by these factories, saw its value drop by £2 billion in just a few days as investors got rid of shares and major retailers, including Amazon and ASOS, delisted the Boohoo range from their stores and websites. This exposure puts huge pressure on companies, and if you think about it, also provides an interesting style of self-regulation in the industry. If you want to be seen as a responsible company, you have to communicate almost real time with the world about how you are responding to business interruptions. And not only that, but how you're taking care of others where you can and managing the fallout where you can't. There's also the question of how you want to be remembered for what you did during the pandemic, not least for business leaders. COVID-19 has provided this perfect opportunity, the permission even, to bring compassion into leadership. Transparency also acts as a catalyst for leaders to be activists and get involved in building back better dialogues, to engage in policy and stimulus packages and the rules around those, and to step up on actions for a greener, fairer world. Many of you will recognize Paul Polman in this image, former CEO of Unilever, and a great example of a leader stepping up on important societal topics, most recently Business for Nature. And of course, social media and tech will also be critical tools for advancing product traceability and links to the good news, not just the bad. Alongside the fear of hyper-transparency in social media will be a positive opportunity to tell important stories of people and products, such as organic farming, women's cooperatives, breakthrough recycling technologies, restoration of landscapes and habitats, the cleanup campaigns on beaches and in oceans. We're going to need a lot more good stories to communicate, Storytelling, story sharing will be absolutely key to how we humans respond to the needs of our time. So to conclude, the time is now for us to come together for people, for climate, and for nature. The textile industry holds so many of the pain points, which means it also holds so many of the solutions in its hands. We can lead a just transformation to a circular and regenerative economy. Our future will be more than one of ESG, the environmental and social governance, but of ESJ, environmental and social justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liesl. This was inspiring, I have to say. We have heard some very good analysis of the COVID-19 situation and its implications. Also, although it's a harsh reality to say, but sometimes for the potential good of the industry, the reset of the situation, the light that is shown on the processes, and the fact that it's very difficult to stop a moving train unless it's derailed by something that we can't control, and then in getting it going again, we try to create a better ride. So it's really good to hear from your point of view. And also the materials point of view, how that could work. And I really liked your statement where you say that it's very much about value sharing throughout the supply chain, and actually that consumers, being an integral part of the supply chain, have a role to play in that as well. So I'm sure our listeners will agree with me. This was very good. And I would like to thank you very much indeed for your presentation.
My pleasure, Matthijs. Thank you for inviting me and Textile Exchange to be part of the program.
Great. Thank you very much.